There's a reason I don't use Twitter. I really didn't want to talk about this. I really don't want to talk about this.
I don't even feel like taking a whiz on this. I used to dream of taking a whiz on this.
But I kind of feel like I have to talk about this. I feel like I have to talk about this because it's yet another example of disingenuous people trying to paint our hobby, this hobby that we love so much, in an unfairly awful light. Orcs is trending on Twitter today. Not D&D Twitter, the whole of Twitter. And it's trending because of the tweet that you see on the screen now. Blatant racism. I'm in genuine awe that this shit came out for this edition of D&D. Holy shit. What is this Mungo raging about? The passage for role-playing an orc from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, which states, most orcs have been indoctrinated into a life of destruction and slaughter. But unlike creatures who by their very nature are evil, such as gnolls, it's possible that an orc, if raised outside its culture, could develop a limited capacity for empathy, love, and compassion. No matter how domesticated an orc might seem, its bloodlust flows just below the surface. With its instinctive love of battle and its desire to prove its strength, an orc trying to live within the confines of civilized society is faced with a difficult task. Nothing too objectionable there. Accurately describes orcs in Dungeons & Dragons. They are violent, brutish, they tend to be savage, they are nomadic, they pillage, they rape, they steal and they kill in order to survive. And there are deep-seated lore reasons for this. Now, in fairness, a lot of people don't know about the lore behind the orcs and why they are the way they are. If you're interested to learn, at least in a somewhat bare-bones sense, I did a video on that a few months ago. My 4th bestiary entry was on the orcs, and I compared the orcs of D&D to those of Tolkien, Warcraft, and Warhammer 40,000. I feel it was actually one of my better videos, so if you haven't seen it, I do highly recommend going and giving it a watch. Now, blatant racism. What does he mean by that? Well, I'm not going to go and dredge up all the tweets that absolutely show this because, quite frankly, I have no desire to dig around Twitter to find them again. And honestly, I'm not that interested in arguing it from this side of the argument. The lore side of why is more interesting to me. And really, it's just the disingenuous nature of this whole situation that I want to talk about. But the little band of sycophants that ran to this guy's defense explained it pretty clearly, which group they thought Wizards was being racist against with this description. They thought black people. Now, I'm not a betting man, but I am very much willing to bet that, like myself, the overwhelming majority of people who are going to see this video or have heard of this happening will have never once in their lives, up until now, looked at orcs and thought, these are supposed to represent black people. In fact, I can safely say that the overwhelming majority of us still don't think that way. I know I certainly don't. Because as far as I'm concerned, no. The orcs are the orcs. They are representative of some of the darker sides of human behavior. Yes, absolutely. And there's good reason for that. It ties back into Tolkien and the way he described the orcs in The Lord of the Rings. And the way he described them was with good reason. There was a purpose behind it. A little history lesson, and this is just a quick shot one. I'm not going to go into deep detail here, but for those who don't know, Tolkien was actually a British soldier in the First World War. he fought against the Germans. And in the war, as is expected, given how violent and terrible the First and Second World Wars both were, in the First World War, he lost a lot of friends to the Germans. So when he wrote Lord of the Rings, and he wrote the Orcs as being this militant, vicious, ruthless enemy, he wasn't talking about black people. Although, people like this guy have said that before too. And ironically, they said that because of the fact that the orcs in the movie are depicted as having dark, charred skin. Tolkien wasn't alluding to black people when he wrote the orcs. He was alluding to the Germans of World War I, who, like the Brits, are also white. Funny that. The orcs in D&D hold a similar niche. They represent a darker side of human behavior. But here's the thing, too. As far as the mechanics of the game are concerned, the orcs, just like with elves and dwarves, gnomes, halflings, goblins, dragonborn, tiefling, kenku, and literally every other playable race that is not human, are not humans. Humanoid, yes, they share similarities. 2 arms, 2 legs, single head with binocular vision, 2 ears, nose, mouth. They look similar to humans. But their skin tones, their height, weight, overall build, the shape of their ears, their bone structure, all different. Very different to humans. Because they're not humans. Now, the argument these people are trying to make is that the language in this blurb is a callback to the kind of racial stereotypes and epithets that those who were racist against black people in the past, who viewed black people as non-human in the past, would have used. The incredible irony here is the mental gymnastics these people are using to absolve themselves of the obvious racism they are displaying. Yes, friends and gamers, there are racists involved in this scenario, and it is people like this guy who are actually drawing the comparison between the pillaging, murdering, violent, rapey orcs and black people. Something the overwhelming majority of us who have played these games have never done. And yet, these disingenuous mungos would have us believe that if we disagree with them, we're the racists. That we're supporting this problematic language, and that being unwilling to speak out against it means that we are tacitly in favor of it. I'm sure I don't need to tell you why that's absolutely fucking ridiculous. But then again, we're talking about a group of people who doesn't believe that racism is representing one race as superior or inferior to another, but that it is some ridiculous formula wherein power plus prejudice is the only way you can achieve racism, and their way of determining power plus prejudice depends entirely on whether or not the person they're talking to actually agrees with what they're saying, if we're being truly honest here. Because these are disingenuous people. These are people who don't actually care about the hobby, in spite of the fact that they will claim that they do. These are people who have no interest in creating good games, in running games, in being involved in D&D for anything, or any tabletop game really, for anything other than a fad, a fashion statement, or in the case of this kind of shit, an exertion of power and control over a perceived community. Well, I don't stand for it. And I'm pretty sure most of you out there don't stand for it either. In fact, based on the responses I saw on Twitter, as much of a cesspool as it tends to be, it seems like this garbage dragged out the saner element of Twitter, who is really starting to get fed up with people like this spreading these kinds of lies about our hobbies. Because the overwhelming number of responses that I saw were people calling out these idiots for how stupid their take was. And that's great. But it's not enough on its own. Because unfortunately, these loud idiots, they are the reason why we hear things about how D&D and tabletop gaming is inherently sexist, how it's inherently racist or homophobic or transphobic or what have you, despite the two biggest companies, Paizo and Wizards of the Coast, bending over backwards during their most recent editions of their games to be as forcefully inclusive as possible, even when it's detrimental to them to do so. Ultimately, I think that these companies don't genuinely care about this one way or another. They're in it for a profit motive. Either way, this ridiculous garbage needs to stop. It needs to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is if we shine a light on it and speak out against it. Because if we don't, then these people are going to continue to try and undermine the hobbies we love with their lies and their slander, and do everything they can to make us look as bad as possible, and more than that, the people who make the games we love look as bad as possible, so that they will capitulate to their demands. And once you've capitulated, that's when these people know that they have your balls in the vice. Because trust me, the demands won't stop coming. So that's about all I have to say on this subject, friends and gamers of all stripes. I'm not going to bother plugging my social media or any of that stuff in this video, because really, I didn't want to make it and it doesn't feel right. But I do feel like this needed to have a light shown on it, despite the fact that I'm sure there's plenty of people already doing that. We need as many voices as possible to speak out against this kind of garbage, because this is the stuff that's ruining our hobby. These are the people who actually embody the awful crap that they like to say dissenters to their beliefs like myself are. And to close out this video, I want to quote Keely Duranson's tweet, because let's face it, he hit the nail on the head here. If you read this and think, quote, "Those bastards are talking about minorities," end quote, you found a racist, all right, in the mirror. Have a good night.